it started out initially, we wanted to help out law enforcement because that's kind of where we come from, the Blue
Of course.
family. But we talked about it a little bit and went back and forth, and we decided that we wanted our foundation to help out all branches of first responders.
Welcome to Elevate, the gathering spot for first responders, their families, and the communities that support them. Hello and welcome back, my elevators, to another Elevate podcast. We appreciate you tuning in and finding out more about all the things that make this podcast great and the people that I bring and I find, the networking that I do. I have met such great people and we've got such a great lineup in the future. So if you haven't yet, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit that notification bell on YouTube. So when we do put a new episode up, you'll get the ding and you'll get registered to do it. Today, I'm very proud and happy to finally connect with Mr. Charlie Black of the Trooper Black Foundation and one of the board members, Sally. How do you say your last name, Sally?
Chetwynd.
Chetwynd. Okay, so Charlie Black and Sally Chetwynd are part of the Trooper Black Foundation. I'm going to have them tell you everything about it. Once again, if you hear anything that resonates with you in this conversation and you want to help this organization and help this nonprofit that we're going to be talking about, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or once we get at the end of the thing and share it with your friends, share it with everybody. So without further ado, Mr. Charlie Black and Mrs. Sally Chetwynd, please go ahead and introduce yourselves and tell us what part of the foundation that you belong to and what you do for them, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm Charlie Black, Charlie Black II. I was named after my dad, and my dad was Trooper Black, and the reason that we have the foundation, Trooper Black was responding to a bank robbery in South Berwick, Maine, back on July 9th, 1964, so almost 60 years ago. And he was actually off duty that day, and he was outside at the courthouse, and somebody, a bystander, came running over to the parking lot of the courthouse and said, hey, Trooper, I think the bank's being robbed. So my dad started to respond to the bank, and before he even got to the bank door, the two bank robbers came out the door and basically guns blazing. They shot my dad 5 times, left him dead there, literally left him dead on the sidewalk, and left my mom pregnant with me. I was born 3 weeks later, and she also had 2 sons, my brother Bill, who was 2, and my brother Clint, who was 5. So left my family in a pretty tough situation. And it's something that I've been trying to process my whole life for the last 60 years as I go on in life, is how do you go about grieving for somebody that you never met, but you know that their death was a huge loss to you and your family. So we're lucky enough that we put this foundation together a few years ago. There's the story behind that, but it's interesting that Sally was just a young girl living in the town of South Berwick, and my dad's death made quite an impression on her, apparently, because as she has gotten older, she's become a writer, and she's written a couple of novels. And her last novel that she wrote, Sturgeon's Dance, she was getting near the end of getting ready to publish it, and she was looking for somebody to dedicate the book to. And for some reason, my dad, Trooper Black, kept coming up in her mind that she had to. It seemed like he was the one the book needed to be dedicated to. So Sally can tell you more about it, but apparently she thought, well, I wonder if I can get in touch with the family. So one day I went to the mailbox and there was a letter there, and I opened it up, and it was from this author who was a young girl when my dad was killed, and asking if we would mind if her book would be dedicated to my dad. And from there, we've formed a friendship. And in the last 5 years, we've put together the Trooper Black Foundation, of which I'm the president, and Sally is the secretary. So I'll let Sally say a little bit more about her role and how things came about.
Awesome. That is truly amazing how people get to know each other and meet, and how that can resonate to so many different parts of your life. So Sally, go ahead and tell us what you do for as the secretary for the foundation, and anything else you want to fill in.
Well, after Charlie and I got to know each other in the summer of 2018, and then the Trooper Black Foundation got uh, created in 2019. Because then, it wasn't too long before the world came to a stop. So
Mm.
everything went into hibernation. And when the board started to meet again in the late summer, early fall of 2022, I said to Charlie, I says, "Hey, I want to know when these meetings are because I'm interested. I want to come." And so I started coming. And Charlie, after the first meeting, said, "Would you be our secretary?" And I said, "Sure, why not? I'm coming anyway."
Yeah, yeah. Like, yeah, be careful what you volunteer for. You just get roped in for more. I know that. So
But it's really been very fulfilling to make this connection because
I
actually,
bet.
Charlie, your interpretation is a little bit off. I wasn't looking around for a dedication. I hadn't even thought about a dedication, but this this concept just blasted into my head. I was doing proofreading. It says you're going to dedicate this book. It's like, well, am I supposed to dedicate
Whoa,
this book to
where'd
Charlie
that
Black,
coming from?
to Trooper Black? And I realized at that time that since I was 10 years old when Trooper Black was killed, um, he'd surfaced it on my mind like once a month my whole life. So we're talking,
Okay.
55 years, and he kept
Hmm,
surfacing. So I think,
interesting.
I think the man continues to serve. He keeps
Yeah,
poking us,
absolutely.
Agreed.
prodding us.
Agreed.
That's
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing we can hope for those of us who do stuff inside the public service is, we leave our mark, we do what we can do while we're here, and then once we're gone, if we can resonate with people inside of their heads as time moves on, then we've left our mark and we've done what we wanted to do. So that's fantastic that he had that kind of impact. I mean, it could have been one of those things where, I mean, one of the things, if anybody ever watches the Elevate podcast and hears some of my previous episodes, I talk about the adverse childhood encounters, and it's called the ACEs score. And when we're young, so you may have heard about Officer Black being killed maybe when you were 10,
Yeah.
and it
I was
left
right in
and
the
then left.
town. Yeah.
Right, so it left so I remember everything about my sister's overdose when I was 10, right? I watched everything. She was 10 years older than me, so she was 20, I was 10, and there's truth to that childhood trauma that happens between 0 age and 18, that it can leave an indelible mark on us. So something like that, and like of course we all know, and as a child I know exactly where I was when the Challenger blew up, right? We were watching the first teacher go into space, and my wife and I were just talking about this yesterday, and we haven't thought about it per se for years, but we just instantly recalled everything about that moment. She was in 5th grade, she was in 6th grade, I was in 8th grade. We recalled everything about that day. We recalled everything about that evening afterwards, and how nobody talked about it. It was just on the news, and she was homesick. And so it's just one of those things where Trooper Black's situation, where he responded and unfortunately, passed away. If it was something that was in the news, and back then in the 60s, nobody really unpackaged stuff well, in general,
No.
it was, you push stuff down, but you still heard about it, and that could have stayed with you for a few days or a few weeks, and then every time you saw a police officer, you thought about when you heard it, and then now as you move through your life, it is in, that negative impact. We remember negative stuff way more and longer than positive stuff. So it's probably the part of that childhood trauma thing that you encountered, that's why you remembered it for your whole life. But fast forward to us as adults and being able to do really cool things and write books and make podcasts and get people together and network and be able to talk on camera and share stories. Now we're helping somebody else. We're helping somebody else that has an understanding, or may not have an understanding, of how things happen inside of our brain. So yeah, it's great it's great that you remembered it. It's not great that it happened, of course, remember.
Yeah. Well, it was my mother was the town correspondent for the newspaper. So,
Oh, so
of
that's
course,
so
we were
yeah, you had
talking about
everything.
this.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And
You had
and within 24 hours, there were AP and UPI photos of Trooper Black lying on the sidewalk that went
oh,
across
so that's
all
even
across the country.
and that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
seared in your mind, you
Yeah.
can't shake that look, you know what I mean? So So, Charlie, when it comes to, did you follow in your father's footsteps and become a police officer yourself, or what did you
Nah,
do as you grew up?
well, I've done a few different things in the course of my working career, but being in the law enforcement profession was something that never really seemed like the right thing for me. I don't think my mom would have been very big on that at all, given the huge loss that she'd already had, and
Yeah.
the fact that you just never know when you put on that badge. Routine can go to tragedy in just an instant. So it's not a career path that I ever really saw for myself. In spite of the fact that when I've taken a couple of tests to find out what I would be good at or what might fit my personality, law enforcement officers come up more than once. So it's kind of funny in that respect.
Yeah.
But no, that was
Well,
never for me.
right. Well, it's true that, just along it's the same lines of that childhood trauma stuff is epigenetics. When your parents, the way your parents had developed some of that genetics passed down to you. So you probably have tendencies to answer some of those questions as a law enforcement officer who or projected law enforcement officer would in those. I've taken those same tests. That's how I got into healthcare. I had no clue what I wanted to do in college. And I took one of those tests and they're like, you'd be a good respiratory therapist. And I was like, what is a respiratory therapist? So I was like, well, that's kind of cool. You deal with, ventilators. And then I just kind of jumped in because I needed to make a decision. And then I ended up loving it. And then I ended up going to be a paramedic and serve my community through paramedicine as well. So yeah, it's funny that, when you took your test that it makes sense that there was something in there that said you should be a law enforcement officer. But what about you, Sally? Did you have any, what other than serving a community like this, like the Trooper Black Foundation? What's your background other than writing?
Well, I actually went into my profession that I was in college for, land use planning. I
Okay.
went into that right out of college at a time when most of my college mates had to pump gas and stuff like that. And I was in that for 6 or 8 years, and then the economy fell apart. And so one of the it was a chairman of the board of selectmen or something like that in a rural town in Maine. He was involved with the Bath Iron Works in their training program. So he
Okay.
said, "Well, things are falling apart in your office, and that's closing soon. Why don't you apply to an apprenticeship at Bath Iron Works?" So I did, and I got in, and they were happy to have. They only had at that point something like 8% females working building Navy ships, so they were
Oh,
happy to
okay.
get a few more women in there. So I got
Right.
into the
Right.
pipe shop, and 4 years later, I came out as a first class licensed journeyman in pipe fitting.
Oh,
So
okay.
unusual experience, and then I got laid off. So then I got work in civil engineering and surveying, doing drafting work. And at that time, we were
Okay.
still doing it by hand. And that's pretty much what I've done ever since. I've now retired from the 9 to 5 commute. When
Yeah.
when the
Yeah.
when the world came to an end a few years ago, and they sent us all home with laptops to
Yep.
work from home, I got very comfortable here. And
Yeah.
I had been thinking about 10 years ago. I was thinking, I'm getting to a point where I'm either not going to be able to commute to work anymore, or I'm not going to want to. So
Right.
the lockdowns really pushed me in that direction, and at that point, 10 years ago, I started looking into what do I want to do in my retirement, and that was let's do writing and editing. And I'm really niching into the editing. I just go
That's
gaga
great.
over finding a dangling participle and taking it home where it belongs.
That is not my superpower. So my superpower, I got a couple of different things, but that is not one of mine. So,
And it's not
so
most people's.
right, right, exactly. So Charlie, to because this is a podcast for the health and well being of the first responder, can I ask you some questions about who? Well, one question is I'm not sure if your mother's still around and your brothers, and then if so, has there been any type of healing that has taken place because you have started this foundation and you're honoring the memory and legacy of your father?
Yeah, absolutely. Quick story about how the foundation came about is back in 2019, on July 9th, the anniversary of my dad's death. I was looking out my front window and there was a flag bracket on the telephone pole out in front of my house that was empty. And I had a thin blue line flag. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to put that flag out there on the pole to remember Dad. And so I did. And I planned on leaving it out there for the month of July, the rest of July. And less than a week later, my mom, apparently for some reason, they thought my mom lived in the house I was living in, but my mom started getting calls from the town manager saying some of the townspeople were all upset about this thin blue line flag on the pole out in front of the house. And they saw it as a symbol of white supremacy and racism, which really, really upset my mom because, again, I mean, every July 9th, she kind of relives that day that took place back in 1964. So it caused quite a local divide. There were a lot of people that were really supportive of us, but then there was definitely a very vocal group who insisted that the thin blue line flag was racist and a symbol of white supremacy. So it kind of went back and forth. That's when I really first. I am not a public speaker by any means, and I am not a professional fundraiser. I'm just the son of a fallen law enforcement officer who's kind of fallen into this because of what happened during that summer of 2019. And after some back and forth, and it was a local story, but it became certainly a statewide story, and even a little bit of a national story about how what did the thin blue line flag represent, and was it racist?
Right. I remember all
So
that.
yeah, so eventually, some of the same townspeople that had kind of asked my mom to ask me to take this flag down, which I did at the time. I took it down off the pole and eventually just put it up on. We put up a flagpole out front. And there's to this day there's a thin blue line flag still over the sidewalk. It's just instead of being mounted on the pole, it's on a coming off a tree. But what came out of it was they approached my mom saying, they felt really bad about what had happened and some of the bad blood that had gone back and forth, and they wanted to know what they could do, and they suggested maybe erecting a bench in memory of Trooper Black. And she said, "No, it's 55 years too late for a bench." She said, "What we would like to do is set up a nonprofit so that we can help out." It started out initially we wanted to help out law enforcement because that's kind of where we come from, the Blue family. But we talked about it a little bit and went back and forth, and we decided that we wanted our foundation to help out all branches of first responders, so law enforcement, fire, EMS, and we didn't want to forget dispatches, which we have in our logo, and I've seen you have in your logo, and we all agreed that that was very important, that dispatches not be forgotten, that they're kind of the first responders, and
Right.
they
That's
deal with
exactly what
some
I talked about.
they
Yep.
deal with some of the same trauma and emotional issues that other first responders deal with,
Yep.
but they never actually, a lot of times, they never actually get to see the
Get the
people
help.
face to face and
Right.
make the connections. So again, all branches of first responders go through experience higher rates of suicide than the general public.
Yep.
They're pretty police officers. There were more police officers and more firefighters who die of suicide and die
Yep.
in the line of duty. So in the fall of that year, we set up the Trooper Black Foundation, and our mission statement is providing support to first responders and their families during times of crisis or need. So we tried to keep it open to all first responders. We didn't want to narrow it down just to the state of Maine or just to the local area, but we like to keep the money in the area as much as possible. But we're open to whatever case arises that comes to our attention. In fact, the first person that we helped out was a California sheriff's deputy who was responding to a domestic incident, and he was shot and killed, and he left his pregnant wife behind with two young boys. So basically the same situation
Story.
as my mom. So he was basically, his family was the first one that we sent money to, and that helped. That actually went through Tunnels to Towers. They had a separate fund for his family to set them up in a mortgage-free house. So we were happy to be a part of that, and they were able to do that, set the family up in a mortgage-free house. So that's where it all started. It was something positive that came out of a local controversy, and we just wanted to build something, again, something positive out of a negative. And as Sally mentioned, we just started going in 2019. We had somebody did a nice big fundraiser for us. It was the last Saturday before the big COVID shutdown, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to get that fundraising event in, but we did. And probably attendance wasn't quite as good as it may have been if COVID hadn't been working its way across the country. But we got that fundraiser in, and then everything shut down, and we didn't do anything for over 2.5 years. But we had money in the bank, and we just got to a point where we decided we gotta do something here. So we either got to get it going, or we got to disperse the funds and maybe give it to an organization like Concerns of Police Survivors, or something like that, and just wrap it up to bad timing in the COVID experience. But we got things going again, and everybody that was part of the original board came back, except our secretary. So Sally started attending the meetings and just kind of was a natural fit. And she's been great. She's very, very dedicated. She makes an hour drive for every meeting.
Oh, wow.
And I don't think she's ever missed a meeting since we've started going again. So it's
Not
been
yet.
great. Yeah, not yet. It's going well. We had a good year last year, and we had our first road race, which was successful, and we're hoping to build on that. We're working on setting up our second annual Troop of Black Foundation 5K for first responders. So that'll be this October 26th here in York, Maine, and we had a concert last year. There were 4 Maine State Troopers who were on the side of the road for a domestic incident, and they were run down by
Mm,
an impaired driver, and it left. They all made it through, but it left
mm,
all of them with serious injuries. Two of
right.
them, two of them still haven't gone back to work. So
Oh,
we had a concert, and that went well. So we're hoping to just do a variety of fundraising events, and some of them will be ones that we plan ahead of time, just kind of for the general fund, and then other ones as situations, as critical incidents happen, we'll try to set up fundraisers for that particular situation and those
right.
particular families. So yeah, and getting back to the other part of your question, my mom is still alive. She's 87 years old. She's still going strong. Uh, she is the vice president of the Trooper Black Foundation, and she makes every meeting. My brothers, unfortunately, we lost a brother just about almost 20 years ago. He committed suicide, and I always believed that his death was not unrelated to the death of my dad. That when that happened back in 1964, the resources weren't good for survivor families. There
Right.
was nobody like Concerns of Police Survivors, and everybody says they're going to be there for you, but after the funeral and the cards are sent, we didn't really hear from anybody for quite a while. So we got through it the way the best we could, and my mom definitely a survivor, but she's still
Right.
going strong, and this really is something that we do together, and it does help make the connection with my dad, with Trooper Black, and feel like his sacrifice wasn't in vain, and that he is still helping people and serving the public.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic, and thank you for going there and sharing that with us. One thing I do want to ask with one of the things that you were talking about in there is your fundraising, and I think this is a good spot to find out how, if someone were to want to donate to the Trooper Black Foundation, how do we go about doing that? And maybe Sally can address that since she is the, well, I don't know if you're the secretary or maybe not the financial the fiscal officer, but either way, like share with us, like, and of course everything will be down in the description, a link where you can go and read all about the Trooper Black Foundation, what's coming up. If you're local or within driving distance of the 5K, all that stuff will be in there. I'll make sure that Sally and or Charlie send me all the information, so anything that we talk about today will be a clickable link and available for you to explore more. But if Sally, if you can go ahead and talk to us about if people just want to donate, how does that work, or support different things that are coming up for you guys?
Well, we do have a donation form on the website, which is trooperblackfoundation.org, and so people can donate through that. A lady at church a couple of months ago handed me $60 in cash, and she said, "This goes to the
Okay.
Trooper Black Foundation." So I put it in my bank and I wrote a check and I sent it to the Trooper Black Foundation at their post office box, and with a note, it's like, "Yeah, this is from so and so." And the woman who's our treasurer, she's in the Chamber of Commerce, so she has the offices and she's right there. Well, I'm an hour away. I'm the odd man out, so to speak. But so she knew who to send a thank you note to, and so that the
Right.
woman could put this down on her taxes if she wanted.
Yeah, exactly. So when it comes to, so it's just a donation form. You don't have like a GoFundMe yet, or a place where people can do stuff through Facebook or online, digital currency towards the foundation, anything like that.
Well, yeah, people can go online, go to trooperblackfoundation.org, and as she kind of said, there's just you scroll down and there's a button that you can click on, and that'll bring you
Okay.
through
Okay.
a secure. It brings
Gotcha.
you through a secure site, and you can pay with a credit card.
Okay.
Yeah,
If,
Perfect.
we
if
use
people
Okay.
want
I
to,
missed, like,
we've
when
got
you said
Clover.
form, yeah.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
yeah, okay, perfect, perfect. Because that, like I said, that'll be down in the information below, and if anybody, is listening to this story and wants to contribute to the Trooper Black Foundation, please don't hesitate, share it with friends and whatnot. I do see your shirt back there. I love that. I like the logo, and I'm trying to figure out my logo, and that's, I like that one. Of course, I won't steal from it or anything, but
We
I think
stole
I've
the
got
idea from somebody else.
Did you? Yeah. Well, I do, and I do like the fact that in my the most recent episode of Elevate podcast, I had two uh I don't want to say retired, but no longer serving as dispatchers, and I had them on my podcast, and they talked about that vicarious trauma from just hearing things, and the one gal that talked about an incident where there was an officer involved shooting, and they were in the debriefing with the officers and everybody on scene, and originally, because it was many years ago, people were like, why is the dispatcher here? They don't need to be here. And she was like, I didn't know for 4 hours if my officer, who I want to protect and serve, is even alive. I think I should be here. And everybody took a step back and was like, okay, that makes sense. And I think that's those, back then, you know, they, because they don't get the same type of initial training as we do for being on scene, it's a different path, but it doesn't mean that they're not facing the same exact frustrations. And when they, that closure, like you mentioned, the closure is so big. The I've talked to every single dispatcher I ever talked to. I ask them one question: what do you guys do for closure? And they're like, we do nothing. Once in a while we'll get, like a drowning victim that got survived that I helped, facilitate something over the phone, will get pulled in, or a CPR, a survivor of CPR will happen, and we'll get invited to that celebration of life. But we don't get the closure like someone like myself, and a paramedic. I've got a button on my computer system when I'm writing my report. If I want to find out what's going on with that patient, boop, I hit a button, and 2 weeks later I'll get a full report of what happened with that patient. and
wow,
and that's closure. It's helpful. It's different.
yeah,
I've also been in the hospital setting where I got closure in person, where I dealt with someone in the ER, and then 2 weeks later, I'm in the ICU because as a respiratory therapist, I travel the hospital, and here I am now taking care of the patient and maybe moving them from an ICU or taking the ventilator off of them after they've been in a bad car accident or whatever. And there's closure. There's hey, well, my efforts are doing something. And police officers, I can only imagine, and I'm going to have a show about this when it comes to their closure. I think that police officers also have a hard time with closure because sometimes when they, especially if it's a bad guy, they don't want to know what happened to him 20 years later. And it may take too long and they may already go through crisis before they can tell if what their efforts did to stop them from doing whatever they were doing or hurting someone, how it affected the global part of the world. So I think if we could do one thing in as a global unit of first responders is figure out a way where each division can have closure somehow when they want it, whether that's just a report of what happened 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years later, or whether that's something that is medically for the medical providers as well. So I'm glad that you guys actually address that with your first responders, and you put that dispatcher. I think there's legislation right now going around the country trying to get them to be labeled as first responders, and I'm all for it. And
Absolutely.
and your foundation is standing strong on that message. So I know that they appreciate it. I appreciate it, because if it wasn't for them and giving me information before I get to scene, I may walk into a shit show. No, watch my French. So
And so much of it is really awareness,
yep,
educating people.
yep, exactly.
So
So when it comes, go ahead, sir.
I was just going to say, you mentioned situations where sometimes police officers find themselves having in a position where they have to shoot bad guys, but they're also put in a position more often than should happen that they have to shoot reasonably good guys who just happen to be emotionally troubled and
Right.
have chosen the path of suicide by cop as the way for
Mm,
them to get their relief from the pain that they're going through. And we I mean, that's a national phenomenon. We've had it happen here locally, and that's just another thing that you know people like ourselves don't have to deal with. And these poor guys who put on the badge, they have to find a way to deal with that sort of thing. So
yeah,
um, yeah, they see and witness a lot that most of
right.
us never do.
Yeah. So you were talking about your 5K. Do you have is when you guys meet up, do you guys have future plans for other fundraisers that are not just donations but could be globally or nationally supported, like golf outings or anything like that? Like, what other ideas that are you, because you're so new and there's so much creativity out there in the world for fundraising. What kind of things are you doing to get the message out and to grow that part of your foundation?
Well, one thing that we're trying to do is for the state of Maine, they have a program where they call them specialty license plates, and there are
Oh,
currently there's quite a few out there.
yeah,
And so there's ones that support breast cancer. There's ones that
yeah.
support the lobstering industry, the lighthouse
Mhm.
restorations. But they have a moratorium in the state right now on new license plates for another year until July of 2025. So unfortunately, they had a moratorium that was supposed to be lifted last July, and they extended it for 2 years. So our hope is to have a first responder license plate,
That's
and
awesome.
it'll hopefully have some kind of version of our logo on there, include all four branches of first responders, and have the saying something to the effect of first responders save lives. And pretty much what the process is for that is you come up with a design, they approve the design, and you go out and you try to pre-sell it. And if you can pre-sell 2,000, 2,000 of those ahead of time, and they'll go into production. So our hope is to kind of lean on the legislature. They have a big session coming up after this fall's election. Kind of lean on them and find the right people and make sure that they don't extend that moratorium on new
Mm,
specialty license plates for the state of Maine. And we're hoping to be right in as soon as we can to try to push ours through. And I've had a lot of people tell me that they don't think we'll have any trouble pre-selling the
Oh, I
amount
wouldn't
that
think
we
so.
need to pre-sell. So that, and again, we're reaching out to all four branches of first responders. So there's a lot of families out there that have
Yeah.
first responders in their families. So that's one thing that we're hoping to do. The road race, we're always open to new ideas.
Yeah, fantastic. Sally, do you have anything to add to that? With things that
Um,
your team has talked about, just for future thought process, or do you welcome, like, do you have like a newsletter or anything like that, or do you welcome people that want to join the foundation and help out? And if someone hears this and they want to, they have a special superpower of helping foundations, like what is that process for people to get involved, to be, to create more things later?
Yeah, we're still very much in the infancy
Yeah,
stage.
that's what I figured.
Yeah, I'm starting to put together a media kit that's going to be
Yeah,
something that people are going to want to be able to access. Um, and I've been trying to get my act together to put out a newsletter. Um, when we get busier, there'll be more need for a regular newsletter. I put one out last August, and haven't put another one out yet. But we've got material. We've got material
right.
too. Yeah, and
Well,
we
one
we
thing just me oh, sorry, go ahead,
and
sorry.
we do need to uh, see what we can find in the way of large corporations that often
Mhm.
are looking for foundations and nonprofits to support.
Yeah, absolutely. That's another big thing. You just
Yeah.
get a team, and hopefully someone listening to this will be somebody that's done that before for people and for foundations, and can contact you and reach out to you. I'm hopeful that, I know I'm going to spread this all around my social medias and my platform. We're getting a decent little following with the Elevate podcast in general, but I also have a couple other avenues I can get to things, along with that faster production on the backside of podcasting. The program that I use will actually make some shorts out of our discussion, and those, you will get a media packet from
Mm.
me that has those shorts in it. So you'll get some stuff that will actually allow you to put that on your social medias, or people that are inside your foundation, if you don't have a Facebook page yet, or a Twitter, and all that stuff, or a YouTube channel. One other thing that I was just thinking about, I mean, right now, because of the power of podcasting, and there's 100,000 podcasts that go up every month in the world. So it's a very big and not upcoming. I mean, it's here. It has arrived. Podcast is one of the number one ways of getting your message out there, becoming a global leader in your space, and authority in your space. So have you guys thought about or talked to anybody that would maybe want to take on doing a podcast for the Trooper Black Foundation, and then they could have, fundraising people on? There's so many things you could do as creativity. You could probably sit down and in one session and create 20 different people that could come on your podcast. And all I know, when I want people to come on my podcast, I'm like, I just mentioned, anybody want to come on my podcast and talk about blank? And I get usually 5 or 6 messages, and over the next week
Mm.
I'll get 10 or 15 more. So is that something that you've thought about doing, is possibly is doing some sort of media thing like that? And of course, having someone that be willing to do it. Of course, that's another thing.
That sounds like a great idea. We
Yeah,
don't have we don't have anybody in mind at this point, but certainly, if once you get the idea, then you start looking out
Yeah,
for,
yeah.
yeah,
this
it's
could
nothing
be
that
something.
I'm sorry, it's nothing that we've discussed to this point. But now that you've kind of planted the seed, it does sound like a great idea. And
Yeah. And you don't have to put out stuff. You could do a bi-monthly thing at one point in time, or and correspond it with your newsletter. Actually, what's really great, because of the way that podcasts are recorded and generated within the software that I use, I have a blog too. It creates my blog from our conversation, and then that's SEO, and then that can go put uh, on the internet, on your website. And now every time you have an episode, you not only have audio visual versions of it, but you also have a written version of what was discussed on whoever you brought into your podcast. So just an idea. I mean, I'm a podcaster. I'm a pro user of podcasters. I'm a proponent of it, and I always think that corporations and companies and businesses that want to grow and extend their reach and become that authority figure in their space need a podcast, and that is no different for even the nonprofits out there like yours. So just think about that, and when it's time to learn more, know that you've got a podcast coach right here that has done everything wrong, so I'm doing a lot of things right now. I spent 5 years banging my head against the wall with podcasting, and now I'm in a groove, and I love it, so, and it's enjoyable for me, so.
Yeah, and I
Well,
do a
we're
lot of business networking, so
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
meeting people a lot,
Yeah, that's
of
where
all
we met.
kinds of,
That's where you and I
yeah,
met. Yeah. We
exactly.
met on that networking event,
Yep.
100%. Yep, and then when I mentioned that I was a first responder, you're like, "Hey, I've got something to talk to you about," and we set up a meeting, and we had a wonderful, I think we talked for over an hour and just
Yeah.
getting to know each other, and you told me all about Charlie and Charlie's dad and the foundation, and it was, and now that's why we're here. It's just what's so amazing about the digital world we live in. So, well, with that being said, I think we should wrap this up. We're right about that 40-minute mark, which is where I like to usually start wrapping things up. Unless either one of you have anything more that you want to say about the foundation, everything will be down here. Is there anything, you said October is the run? Is there anything prior to October that we would want to make sure that this gets out beforehand?
October 26th, that's the run. That's the biggest event we have planned. We're doing some smaller stuff on the anniversary of Dad's death around on and around July 9th. We're doing a couple of
Okay.
things, but that's just kind of local stuff. But again, people can go to the website, troopofblackfoundation.org, and they can donate through the the button there, the donate button, or they can. There's an address on there. If somebody would prefer to send a check, they can find the address on there. We love checks. They're great too. And we have a Facebook page if people
Okay.
want to check us out and learn more about us and about the 5K race that we're doing. Last year, Sally had a friend down in Texas who did the 5K race virtually. So
Oh,
maybe
I was going to go
Yeah.
there. So that's
Yeah.
awesome that you all offer that. So, yeah, we'll have whatever type of information that anybody needs that want to do it virtually. We'll make sure that's in there too. And I encourage anybody listening to this podcast that want to support the Trooper Black Foundation that they have that option of doing it virtually. Because I was going to go there after you were done talking. So I'm glad you mentioned. I'm glad it's an option for people. So I've never done a 5K. I think I may be doing one.
It only takes an hour to walk.
Right, right, right. And I walk so much as, I mean, heck, I just got back from Disney. We were there for 5 days. Trust me when I told you, I did like
yeah,
7
you did.
5Ks
Yeah,
every day.
you did a marathon.
Yeah. Yeah, my friend in Texas, she says, "Well, I can't get there because it's a long ways away for a day." And she said, "How about if I map out? My husband and I map out a 5K route, and I'll run that." And so she did,
There
and
it
she
is.
sent pictures, and we sent her a race T-shirt and with the number
Yeah.
that for that she was, and
Yeah,
oh, she was thrilled. She was
that's
thrilled.
awesome. I'm
Yeah.
doing it. I'm doing it. Book me down. I'll go in and sign up. Is there a virtual button compared to on in-person button on the website? Or is it, how does that work?
Well, the actual online registration has not been totally
Okay.
set
Yeah.
up for this year, but it will be very soon.
Okay.
So people can check in on the Facebook page and on the website. But we will definitely have. So that's something that we probably should add this year is a button to do it virtually. We didn't do it last year, but I know that's an option on there. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
something that
That'd be
we need
great.
to do and just try to bring in more people and
Yep.
expand the audience, and this has been a great thing to keep my dad's memory and his sacrifice alive. And
Absolutely.
here we are, 60 years later, and we're still talking about him, and he's still being remembered, and it it, it definitely does help heal from
That's
what
good.
the family's
Yeah.
gone through.
And he's
Fantastic.
still
Well,
poking us.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he is.
Yeah.
He's running those 5Ks upstairs too. So, when it comes to just a clerical stuff, if I can always add the the 5K link at a later time in the YouTube.
Sure.
and
Yeah.
into the Apple and Spotify description. So if that does come later, this gets launched and it's not there and ready yet, just update me, Sally, and then I'll drop it in. And then, anybody listening to this, I'll make sure I'll put it at the top of the page whenever it comes to me. So that way someone will know right away before they see or read a description that, hey, the link is live and we can go. So if someone's listening to this and it's not there yet, just keep on checking back and go ahead and subscribe and get alerts. So then you can just keep on coming back to the podcast and getting information. And then that'll remind you to come back to look at the Trooper Black Foundation podcast. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Charlie, it was such a pleasure to meet you. And Sally, once again, thank you for setting this up. You and I were brainstorming how we could make this happen, and here it is, and it's happened. And I'm just so happy and proud to have met both of you when at the times that I met you. And Charlie, it's great that I got to meet you and that you're keeping your father's memory alive with your family and the community, and just inspiration for all of us first responders that there's more than just a public servant out there when we're done with our job, that we can keep it moving on and in the face of tragedy. So thanks, everybody. And
Thank you, Kyle.
take care.
Thank you.
No problem. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, hit that bell for notifications. And like I said, if you hear this message and something resonates with you and you think someone should hear this, go ahead and share that with them and let them know how awesome this podcast is. So want to thank you so much for tuning in, Elevators, and everybody have a safe evening and have a safe week. Take care.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thank you.
Nice meeting you. Thanks, Sally.
That's a wrap for this episode of Elevate, brought to you by Frontline Empowerment Solutions, your partner in building resilience and fostering continued growth. If you found something valuable today, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who could use it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on our next conversation. We're here to bring you more stories and insights, all aimed at strengthening the first responder community. Together, let's keep elevating each other, one episode at a time.